Sorry, you're live. I won't ask a
No,
question.
you're right. We're live. Thank you, Daryl, for that introduction. We are recording this, but I can edit this bit out, so that doesn't matter. And I don't think there's anybody watching, so the fact that we're recording live doesn't really matter. Thank you guys for joining me for this hangout right now. I'm fantastic. Andrew's just joined us at the start, so we're just starting, Andrew. Thank you everyone for joining this hangout. We had a hangout 2 weeks ago where we just really discussed the Canvas and what it's for. And how we see it using. Luke shared a bit of how he's using the Canvas at his school. But after we turned off the recording button last week's Canvas, we had a bit of a discussion, and we thought it might be a great idea to, rather than just talk about the Canvas, to actually do a Canvas together. So that's what we're planning to do tonight, if that's all right. And basically, the Modern Learning Canvas is an attempt to, I guess, describe learning and teaching in a visual way. So it basically suggests that we can describe any learning and teaching model with 9 essential building blocks. So over the course of the last year, I've been, I guess, trialling it with different schools and basically trying to get teachers in all different contexts to really be able to describe their learning and teaching practice. And by doing that, I guess really have conversations about learning and teaching, but then also ask them what-if questions about it. So far we've found that it works pretty much in any situation. So we've described it with lots of different teaching practice, and it really is a tool that you really need to understand is to, I guess, get your hands dirty and try it out. So that's what we're going to do. And welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing, Richard?
Good. I was really hoping that Mel Cashin was going to be here tonight to do this first activity, because I thought we'd do the Canvas. Sometimes is a little bit threatening, so just lately we've been trying I guess a more light-hearted, less threatening way to get into the Canvas. So I thought we might try that quickly tonight, if that's okay. At the recent EdCamp Melbourne, at the end of the day, Mel ran an activity which apparently is her and Brett Lockyer's idea. One night, I think, sampling some local products, they decided that imagining schools in a different light might be might be a good way to talk about learning and seeing what's possible. So I did it a little bit a while ago. Yes, Andrew, that's what I was talking about. I did it. I've tried it. So some of the things they talked about was what if schools operated like cruise ships, or what if schools operated like late night takeaway vans, or what if schools operated like hospitals, or what if schools operated like circuses, or what if schools operated like jails. So it's about imagining schools in a different light. So I thought that's what we might do tonight as I guess a warm-up activity to talk about the Canvas and to get some ideas. So I thought we'd do that activity, and I thought maybe, will we choose a hospital? Is that a good way to imagine? People happy if we talk about that?
Why not?
So if schools operated like a hospital, how would they work? Any ideas?
Be lots more record keeping.
Lots more record keeping.
I gave you that learning object. I gave you 2 prescriptions of it. Nothing's happened.
That's right.
Some people wouldn't make it. There'd be dead people.
There would be dead people.
Maybe just dead ideas.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, there'd be an emergency room, surely.
Yes, there'd be an emergency room.
First aid.
We'd be grossly underfunded, but there's no surprise there.
Yeah.
Teachers would be better respected, I guess. Yeah. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
Be a big waiting list for elective learning.
There'd be a definite hierarchy, that's for sure. Doctors and nurses.
Yeah.
Yes. So
it'd be easy to medicate.
Yeah, it would be easy. Okay, so I'm going to try to screen the. So now we've talked a little bit, have a little bit of thought. Let's have an attempt to see if we can fill in a canvas to represent that. So I'm going to just. I haven't even opened it yet. Okay, let me turn on screen sharing. Screen share. You can all see that?
Yep.
Screen now.
Mhm.
And hopefully if you talk it shouldn't go away. I'm going to create, so what if schools operated like hospitals? Hospitals, I can spell. Okay. So this is the canvas. If you haven't seen the canvas, and I think most people would be, there are 9 building blocks of the canvas. When we fill in a canvas, when we work with a group of teachers and discuss learning and teaching, there's no right place to start. You can start wherever you're most comfortable. And essentially they're the 9 building blocks. So the one in the centre is about the activities. So these are the things that you would see if you went into a classroom, or where if learning doesn't have to happen in a classroom, or if you went on to the online space, or if you went outside, or you even activities that happen out of school that happen home. So the things that we would see go in the activities. Then we also have the roles and responsibilities. So we have the learners' roles and responsibilities. What are the learners responsible for? What are the roles that they take on? What are the most important things that they do? And the same for the educators or the teachers. What are their roles and responsibilities? So they're the 3 major horizontal boxes. Then we have the strategies. So we talk about the learners' roles and responsibilities, and we talk about the learning activities. What are the strategies that the learners use to make those learning activities successful and to actually enable them to, I guess, accomplish or be successful in their roles and responsibilities? And when we're talking about strategies, we're always talking about them from the learning point of view. So if we're talking about lecturing, for example, we wouldn't call it lecturing because that's what the educator does. We'd say listening to lectures, or, you know. And then we also have the enablers. So the enablers are the physical and technological things that enable. So, you know, we talk about, so if we talk about a strategy might be to get feedback from peers, then sitting in groups would be the enabler. Or if we're talking about a lecture, listening to a lecture is a strategy, then the lecture hall. Or if it's online and we're talking about flipped learning, then I guess the video or whatever would be the enabler. So we've got the activities, the learner role, the educator role, the strategies the learners use, and the enablers. We also then have the culture. So what are the agreed things that support learning, the agreed around the relationships? What are the rules? So the rules go in the policies. What are the expected outcomes or the products? What does the learning produce? What's the whole point of it? And then finally, the pedagogical beliefs. So what are the pedagogical beliefs or beliefs about learning and teaching that underpin this whole model? So if we were going to talk about a hospital, schools operating with hospitals, the things that we talked about before, has anybody got some ideas about what we might put in where? Where do you want to start?
One of the policies could be that people in the most need go first.
People in the most need go first.
Or get treated first. I guess
learners with the most
policy.
needs. Yeah? Anyone else?
So enablers, I mean, in hospitals it's drugs. So
maybe learning drugs.
Yeah, learning drugs.
What would learning drugs be?
Well, could you say, like, could they be
memory
iPads?
Memory enhancers. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it.
ADHD drugs.
Mind-altering substances.
Ritalin.
Ritalin.
Okay. What about the activities? I guess learners. Did learners first identify their needs? First identify learning needs?
Yeah, most likely.
Wouldn't that be the physician's role to identify the learning needs?
Would it be secondary?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so they identify themselves first
I
to
guess
actually arrive there.
Yes, and then the educator would assess the learning needs, wouldn't they?
I would.
There'd be a lot
Would
of,
strategy be one-to-one, or you've
that
got
might be yeah, it's interesting. Strategies. What were strategies for?
Well, strategy might be to self-diagnose. You'd use the internet, wouldn't you? I mean, we all do that.
Well, you compare your I guess known symptoms.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, you would. Yep. So
Is that what we mean?
So you could compare known, is
And
the
Google.
learner aware of their own deficiency and what they don't know, if you know what I mean?
Yes. What else?
Deficient.
What's the educator or the doctors or what's their roles and responsibilities in this whole learning? What are if teachers acted like doctors and nurses, what would their roles and responsibilities be?
Well, they need to ask questions.
Yeah, diagnose,
Diagnose.
learning gaps, perhaps, learning problems.
Prescribe.
Yep.
Make referrals to specialists.
Yeah. Make referrals. Sorry, I'm slow. Somebody else said prescribe, didn't they?
Yep.
And I can't see the chat. I can only see my window. If people are adding chats, I'm sorry, I can't see it. What else?
They probably deliver good news and bad news.
Yes, true. Take no responsibility for failures.
Yep.
Am I allowed to write that? I'll write that. What about the learners? Do they have any?
Let's go.
Do they have any roles and responsibilities in this system? What would they have? The learners.
They need to have a bit of trust, I suppose.
Yeah, true.
They need to get themselves to the hospital.
You know what? I might put trust in culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
I might put trust in culture, but I like it. Yeah, they have to. They do have to self-diagnose to a point, don't they?
Isn't there also a level of acceptance? Or maybe
Yeah.
sometimes skepticism, I don't know, like, do you always... I mean, you got to put your critical thinking hats on, you got to think, are they telling me the truth? Like, I mean, I suppose the doctor's role is to also diagnose or make explanations in plain English so that the patient or the learner understands.
Okay, so communicate.
Yeah, communicate in patient language or learner language, perhaps.
Yeah, learn a language. What about asking for a second opinion? Is that a culture thing or is that a policy? Are you really allowed to ask for a second opinion? I think, because you're talking about, Andrew, about trust and about communicating. Policy, learners can ask for second opinions.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a rule.
Why not?
Or should the educator be seeking a second opinion?
Well, that's true. So seek help. Seek help.
Could become a policy too, that you're often seeking more information.
Yeah. And I guess they have to also upskill. And I guess that might be an enabler. Mind it, who do they seek help from? You know, so from professors, and I'm not a hospital person. And what are they called? The really smart doctors. They're really
Consultants.
Yeah, consultants. So consultants are often a.
I have a wife that works in a hospital. No.
So do I.
Yeah.
Would doctors have to adhere to a code of conduct?
Yeah, probably. So that might go in the policies then.
Yep.
Code of conduct. What about the outcomes and the pedagogical beliefs? Any ideas?
I guess they would have to believe that they can cure everyone.
Oh, that's
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess they can't sometimes.
What about this?
It'd be scientific, though. I mean, medicine is it's evidence-based, scientific. There's no hocus pocus.
What about okay? So it's really facts.
Yeah,
facts
fact-based.
and evidence-based.
Evidence-based, yeah.
Evidence-based practice. I don't know if you saw my one. Pedagogical beliefs could almost go in culture too. Being educated is seen as a human right. You know, so everybody should. Well, whether
So
we
it's
believe that
universal
anymore.
health. Yeah.
Universal health, universal
Yeah.
education.
Education.
Maybe that's an outcome. Universal education.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are we starting to capture this quite well?
Hmm.
Are there any gaps that we didn't catch in our first discussion about? I know it was only really briefly.
What about the hierarchy that Andrew mentioned? Like, there's a definite set of roles that nurses do, doctors do, surgeons do. Yeah.
I tried to ignore that because I didn't know if I could spell it. Help me out.
Isn't there a spell check in Canvas?
Right click is your friend.
There is a spell check. There we go. Oh, what happened? There we go. So a real hierarchy, and that's about, well, it's culture, but it's also politics. You know, that real culture of, I've got to ask, this is not my role, whatever. Yeah. Anything else we didn't get? And welcome, Lois. Sorry, I didn't see you pop in. I've just been looking at the screen.
Thanks. I think I'm on mute.
No, I can hear you.
Oh, really?
Yes. Either that or I'm talking to myself.
No, it's just my microphone looks like it's muted.
Okay, well, we can hear you. Okay, so that's the Canvas, and it's that's how the Canvas. Does that sort of make sense about how we use the Canvas and how we might have a conversation around learning and teaching?
Mm.
Shall we be brave now and choose something a bit more serious? How are we going to do this? Has anybody got something that they'd love to try to model, or do you want to pick something really simple like maths or reading or writing, or choose the arts? What would people think is a good? Got any ideas? Just because I feel like a magician at the moment, and if I pick something, you know, I haven't got a plant in the audience. I've worded up now to suggest something. iPads in schools, Andrew's got. Okay, interesting. We could go with that. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah, well,
There's no smiles. There's no smiles.
Was that a joke?
No, don't. No. Part joke, part serious. I'll be just interested, just for my own. Yes, I don't know. We can narrow it down a bit.
What about data in schools?
Oh, no.
That's
This is about, and I guess this is about a learning model. So, and I guess it's about, you know, sometimes you might say, well, and just think about iPads, because it might be a little bit general, but it might be good too, because do we say this is how we want to use iPads in maths? And I guess the same with data, but we can do a whole school picture. There's no problem with that, zooming out and saying what does iPads look like at schools and what does data look like. So, hi Jenny, how you going? We're just deciding now, we've just done, Jenny, we've just talked about what if schools operated like a hospital, and we've modelled that on the Canvas, and now we're talking about maybe having a bit more of a serious go at modelling something that we encounter in our school. So that's what we've been doing so far.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so shall we go
Richard,
do you want to describe that? Sorry, Daryl, yes, please.
I was just going to say, do you want to give us a bit of a sense of some of the things that you've used the Canvas to describe? Like you said, you've done some work with schools. What are some of the things that they've tackled?
We've generally done largely we've done quite normal things, reading, writing, you know, maths, but we've also had schools, and I've shown this multiple times, you know, as Varad talked about their Arboretum, how they used it. We've also worked with coaches that have then talked about how they work with schools. So, you know, if you're in leadership, you might even talk about, well, can we do a model of Canvas and talk about how we work with the teachers in the school, you know, and look at professional learning. So it doesn't just have to be, you know, working with children. It is a universal model. So it could be, you know, I know a few people in this room are in leadership roles, so that's, you know, something about that too. So we've used that whole gamut of, this is classroom. It's more either been that. It's more been on the mechanics of doing that rather than looking at this is what our school believes about teaching and learning. But I still think it would work with that, you know. So, we happy to go with Andrew's iPads in schools?
Yep.
Do you want to describe a context then for us, Andrew, just to give us a bit of shared understanding before we attempt to? So, sort of maybe describe your school or a fictional school and how you see they may be used, or what you mean?
Well, I'll go with my school. I actually just put the purchase order in. Thanks, Lois, for your suggestion on a few things. So to hopefully around about 128 iPads should arrive in the near future for the junior area, Peter 2. So early years, iPads. It's a school has had very low sort of any infrastructure really for ICT. They're just starting to build it up now, and they've just finally got a whole wireless infrastructure rebuilt, and that's all done, ready to go. And yeah, so this hopefully they've had maybe a ratio of 5 to 1, possibly 6 to 1.
Okay.
It's even less now that we've got rid of some really old devices. So the teachers have been sort of a bit sort of wary of ICT until recently, because they've never really trusted it. It hasn't really worked, and they've never really had any, I suppose, sort of drive in that area. They're very good at doing things like literacy and numeracy. They're a model, you know, Northern Metropolitan school in that regard. Great results, but they're looking at how they can change things up, especially in that area.
Okay, well that sounds good, and I know we've got a few people that are experts in this area, so it should be good. Okay. And grab the microphone, anybody, anytime. So let's do that. Okay, new model. I'm just going to call it iPads in schools. Is that what's the best thing to call it?
Yep.
It's Focus P2. Do you want to keep it?
Okay, good idea. Yeah, Peter 2. Thank you, Daryl. Okay, where do we want to start? And everyone can still see that screen. I've still got it on the camera, haven't I? Yeah.
So
Okay.
Sorry to jump in. I was going to say, I know Jenny and I think Lois might too has used iPads with younger students. So I just wondered how it might fit in a literacy block. How might it, like if we started off just the basics, some activities, how would the iPads be used there? I just thought Jenny might have had some good ideas, or Lois perhaps, or anyone else that's in that area.
Well, we'd be using them in our Daily 5 now, because we do the Daily 5 in the literacy block. And so I suppose they could use them for read to self and record their reading. They could use them for listen to reading. They could video themselves reading. They could be doing their writing on there. They can be planning their writing by brainstorming and use of pictures to get a visual about what they're going to be writing about. Making posters and things, and then writing that. In your early years, your focus really is on reading and writing, because you're actually learning the craft of reading and writing more than reading and writing to learn. You're still at that very early stage where you do need to learn to read and write. It's hard to read and write to learn if you can't read and write. So
sorry, Jenny, to interrupt, because we crossed from activities to pedagogical beliefs. So could you describe, because you started talking about, okay, what's our view about learning? Can you give that to me in a couple of points, maybe around, or one or 2 points about, I guess, the pedagogical beliefs around using iPads in this literacy time? And you did say it. You said sorry, I was writing as I was listening, so I missed it. Could you just repeat that?
Reading and writing to learn.
Yes.
Reading and writing to learn, and learning to read and write. And I guess that all children can learn would be one of our pedagogical thinking things, that all children can learn. And
other people jump in. Don't just leave it to Jenny. This is a conversation.
All children can learn given time and support.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny, what you were saying is they're using the iPads to learn to read and write. rather
Yes.
than reading and writing to learn at this stage.
Sometimes,
you said
yes.
but you said at that age that they still spend a lot of time learning to read and write, and the iPad's good for that.
In the literacy block, yes.
In the literacy block, yes.
They may use them for learning other things not in the literacy block where the focus isn't always on reading and writing.
I think you should put speaking in there too, because they're really good for kids getting their oral feedback and listening to themselves speak.
So,
And,
Lois, would you be happy if I put that in the outcomes then? So the outcomes is really around these literacy outcomes: reading, writing, and speaking and listening. Is that what you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that'd be good.
But isn't it also an outcome? Is that, I mean, when I look at the preps that have come in to Bell, for example, they walk into a classroom that's devoid of technology, yet most of the learning that they've had at home also is with some form of device and technological device. I mean, they're playing games, they're starting to learn how to read on the device. It's like there's a bit of a disconnect there when they walk in. It's like foreign to them. So wouldn't an outcome be that there's some sort of fluidity between the learning that's taking place at home and the learning that happens at school? Is that worthy of putting in there?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering whether, just when you're talking about that difference between school and home, is that a
Maybe it's
culture
cultural.
thing, or I'm just wondering, what do you think? I don't want to force, and really when I have worked with teachers, and I know Luke's the same, we never say, no, you put that in this box, because it's around getting out conversations. It's meant to be an iterative canvas too, so we can change things around later. So I'm not, if you want to put in outcomes, please put it in outcomes is what I'm saying. But could you consider can you just explain that just slightly more, what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I suppose, I mean, maybe it is a learning culture, perhaps. I mean, I suspect that it comes I'm wondering whether a learning culture is established in a different way once there's contact with the school, if you know what I mean. The school perhaps to some degree drives the learning culture that happens at home once the contact's established. But I wonder whether there needs to be, where there's more fluidity between what has happened before, what actually does occur at home, as opposed to what occurs at school as well. Maybe they'll be more compatible, perhaps. There's the routines that happen at home with your reading and your strip books and your golden and red words and all sorts of things that happen as a result of school. But when you're using a device at home, perhaps they're not. Maybe they're playing games, they're making movies, or they're doing all sorts of other things using a device that doesn't. You're watching iView. I don't know, like.
How's that? What I've got there? I've added with the technology, because we're really talking about how we're using technology at school and home. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Any other thoughts? What's the teacher's role, the educator's role, and responsibilities when we're using iPads in a P2 situation?
To scaffold learning, I suppose. Differentiate.
Sometimes to instruct those children that haven't had access to iPads. We still have some that don't. And it's the first time they've used them when they come to school, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But it's not only that, though. At home, if they're left to their own devices, they don't usually have the same apps as they would have at school. They would often just have gaming apps. And so there are different ways of using them at school to what they use at home.
Yeah, I
So
think to set
the educational. If I put that there, Lois, educational apps as an enabler. Yeah. Sorry, was that you, Damien?
Sorry, just throwing my 11-year-old son out of the room. I think one of the educator roles could be to set boundaries, because I think as was mentioned before, we have at my school a bit of a negative perception on iPads. A lot of people wary of screen time because at home they're used just as games and for babysitting devices, and at school we need to set the boundaries and show the parents that it's not a babysitting device, that we have a specific task we want achieved. So setting boundaries for the kids but also for parents.
So you're meaning rules and policy?
And also educators being clear about their learning intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that too, that the role of the educator is to determine whether the technology actually enhances what we're doing, rather than just be busy work or whatever it might be, that it actually helps achieve or enhance the learning outcome.
Yeah.
A lot of that is policy. I think it would go in policy.
Yeah, I noticed that's a good. How would you, for the policy point of view, can we describe it in a little more, like what are the policies? You know, and I know we've only got a small box, but we want to say, well, what are the,
choice of apps on the iPads could be a policy.
So what was that?
Choice of apps on the iPads can be a policy because we only have apps you create with on our iPads these days.
Yep, ours is similar.
Yep.
Okay, that's a good one. Only have creation apps. So that's a policy. Any other policies while we're in the policies box that enable this to be effective in the P2P?
Has to be your cyber safety, cyber digital citizenship policies, and your acceptable use policies, your whole eSmart culture. So now that could be a cultural thing. Yeah, eSmart.
Permission for photo.
Yeah, that's right. Permission to publish.
Care of the equipment. There's policies around that.
Yeah.
If it's a bring your own device situation, I suppose there's going to be a whole slew of policies around the type of device perhaps that you bring, whether it's charged, whether it's policies around whether it's family used device or child use device, because there's issues around children bringing in family use devices, especially if there's teenage kids or adults using them and things like that.
Yeah.
We actually had whether they were held up by families or not, but we actually gave them rules about where in the house the children were allowed to use the school-owned devices when they were taking school-owned devices home. They had to be used in areas. Yeah.
Now, we're talking about just a side note. We are talking about a learning canvas, and we're talking about a learning model, learning and teaching model. So when we think about policies, and usually we're only talking about the top 3 or 4 in any box, but we're sort of thinking what enhances learning. So what makes this model possible? And obviously, so I'm thinking about the different policies we've had. I guess you could say, well, all policies make it possible because if we muck it up, the program will be canned. But more thinking of, well, bring it to school charged is a good one, because if it's flat, it won't work. Now you could say all these other policies, if what you were talking about at the end, Jenny, in the rooms, because if it gets broken, then we can't use it too. So in one way, I'm splitting hairs, but but I'm just pointing that out to, as we fill in this canvas, we're thinking not just all our rules. What are the rules that actively, I guess, make this work, or alternatively, especially when we talk about rules that get in the way of it working too. So
what about equity?
Yeah, sorry.
What about equity?
Equity?
Yeah, good one.
Yeah. Where would you put that?
In policies.
In policies. So everyone has their own.
Well, those that can and those that can't are supplied, so that everyone does end up with one. Yeah. No one is left behind.
So everyone, all learners need one.
And all learners have the opportunity to use one, I guess, because they might have them, but they don't get the opportunity to use them. I know a lot of secondary kids that have carted around netbooks for years and never opened them, so they decide not to take them.
Yes. Okay, how about we switch to the learner role? And I know we're talking about and responsibilities? I know we're talking about quite young students here, but what's some of the roles and responsibilities of the students, the learners in this situation?
I think would it be to open? I suppose. Like, I think some kids are going to come with more capital than other kids, like around perhaps the use of the device and knowledge. So have an open. The learner is to be open, and I suppose the educator's role is to encourage the sharing of ideas, I suppose, or sharing of knowledge, and it's the learner's responsibility, communal responsibility, I suppose, to play that role as well.
Okay, so we put that in culture as well, because you said.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll put it in both places at the moment, but.
To stay on task is a thing they have to come to terms with.
Yes,
quite early.
Sure do. Yes.
Staying on task, and we just have lessons where you staying on task is the object.
Anything else?
I guess respect, looking after the device, I suppose.
Yep. That can just be handling it and all those sorts of things.
Yep.
Okay.
Do they have to make sure they're charged? Plug them in their classroom if they're flat?
Yep.
Ask 3 before me.
Yeah.
That's a culture.
Yeah,
that's culture. Yeah. Or it might be a strategy.
It might be
strategy.
strategy.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's probably
Let's talk about
strategy.
strategies. When these students could be talked about that they need to be creation apps, when they're creating with these apps. So I don't know, we're quite broad the way we've pictured this generic, and I guess that's that. So what are the strategies that, so we've got some students, are they working individually, are they working in groups? What are the roles that their peers take? So what are the strategies they use as about social, so their interactions with the students and teacher and other people that may be in the classroom or other people that may be at home? What are the strategies they use to enable whatever they're doing to be more successful? And what are the strategies they use to make better decisions about their own learning and what they're doing? So sometimes it's for the strategies and also for the enablers. It's worth looking at those three lenses. I do that a lot, thinking about how do we, learn with others and communicate and feedback and all that sort of stuff. So the social aspect, whatever we're working on, the project, how is that more successful? What are the strategies we're making that to be better quality or deeper or more creative? And also how the self-directedness, how do we make better decisions about and choose what we do and when we do it? So what are some of those strategies that, and I know we're talking about very young students, but anyone got some ideas?
Wouldn't the same strategies that, I know you've done one before on P2 reading and that sort of stuff, wouldn't those strategies still be the same, except the iPad would be involved, like say you go whole group, small group, back to whole group, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Wouldn't those strategies still be in place, but there'd be certain times where you use the iPad for the activity or for the learning, or if it's a one-to-one strategy, it's an individual. It's just that you've got iPads instead of pens and paper. I know that's straight substitution, but there'll be other times where it actually enhances what you do.
So we talk about feedback from peers, especially when we're working in groups. Does that change at all with the iPad? Can I add anything? I'm happy not to. I'm not trying to force something.
Some peer coaching happens a lot with iPads. Peer coaching.
Okay.
So they quickly like to help each other. Once someone knows something, they pass it around. A lot of sharing.
So sharing. Am I putting words into your mouth, Jenny?
No.
No, good.
Not that I can't really see what you're typing. It's a bit small. So.
Yes. And so the enablers for sharing those discoveries, and that's where, when I looked at the early years, you talk about sitting in groups, or is an enabler for sharing discoveries, or the whole sharing time at the end of the class. The reflection time is also another enabler. So groups and shared reflections, shared.
Yeah, I agree with Lois. The mirroring, I thought the same thing. The mirroring of the device. So if you've got Apple TV,
perfect.
Things like that.
Air mirroring. Is it air mirroring? I don't know what it's called.
AirPlay.
Yeah.
Sharing.
Just basically sharing, yeah.
But that's the enabler, though, isn't it? So you've got sharing is your strategy, and your enabler is, using the technology. And then I guess we talk about the culture. The culture is when I found something really interesting, I do share it, or maybe that's even a learner's responsibility. So the learner responsibility is, if I find something interesting, I've got a responsibility to share it with the rest of the class. Yes?
Yeah, and I suppose that could also fit into the strategies too. The idea of, like, if, say, for example, a student's doing something to do with their, just off my top of my head, say their golden words, and they manage to write it into an app and draw an activity, they could then quickly email it just by to the teacher. The teacher can, as a strategy, collect a repository of all those examples of those work to reflect on, assess on, report on.
Yeah.
So as another way, I mean, you could do it via book, of course.
Collect learning samples. We'll put that on the teacher. Yeah. That's another responsibility.
I guess for the students to hand in. Is that what you were getting at? Handing in work?
Yeah, handing in work. So they become self-directed and responsible for handing in their work.
Handing in work. And that could also be a culture of celebrating learning.
Yeah, but the other thing is about it that I find fascinating is that when, the possibilities of sharing the work is that it doesn't just go, there's more possibilities with the iPad, I suppose, than it being stuck in your book for it to be viewed by multiple educators. So say you're in and most early years classes tend to work this way anyway. The classes are quite fluid. Kids move around from class to class. So I suppose it facilitates that notion of all the teachers sort of being in on the same conversation around where the students are at, I suppose, with and looking at a literacy block, with their reading and writing.
So learning communities of learning.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you. That's how it should have been expressed.
But when you're talking of sharing too, the fact that it's a digital device and that work is instantly digital, it's not locked down into a book anymore. It's available to be shared on a blog or out there, and the parents can be much more involved with their work. And so I think there's a lot of responsibility for teachers that we've got to think about, and teachers have got to work out how they can. Firstly, they've got to work out how they can mirror and teach well with an iPad, and then how they can move forward and share the work that the kids are doing.
And be able to articulate why that's important as well. I think that's... the educator's got to be able to articulate the intent behind why you would want to do it. So what's the point? I mean, of sharing the work. Why would we want to put it on the net?
Yeah. The teacher has to model it. I mean, the teacher should have their own, for starters, and be seen to be using it and modelling it.
Yeah.
Can we put, Andrew, some of those things you said about the web, could we put that into either outcomes or pedagogical beliefs? Because you're talking about a loftier goal there, aren't you?
Yeah, I suppose.
That's a one on face value.
Yeah. I suppose you could say, are you able to, so pedagogical belief would be the idea of being a connected person, I suppose. So does it lead into your pedagogical idea of being connected and adding to a shared community? I think it's still a community of practice, like what Jenny was trying to say. Yeah. Essentially, that's the pedagogical belief there. And that community of practice could be either locally or globally, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You have to be
could we say,
so go, Daryl.
I was just going to say, could we say that the more authentic, or the closer you get to authenticity of the task, the more value it has to the learning? Is that a belief?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I guess is one of the...
Richard?
Yeah.
Sorry, Luke, I cut you off.
Sorry. I was thinking, is one of the outcomes going to be a digital portfolio of some sort?
Could be.
Yeah. Rich student work, or whatever we're going to call it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a benefit rather than an outcome, that it's much easier to create a digital portfolio, but it's not really the purpose of having an iPad.
Yeah, it's almost built into the learning process, isn't it?
So what we've done is spend some time trying to describe, a shared understanding about how iPads could be used in this early years classroom, in this Peter 2. So we've got an idea, and really I think the way that we've done it is we just try to, when I lead these conversations, and Luke last time shared how when he leads these conversations as well, is we try to guide the conversations and all the good things. It's funny we're talking about a Peter 2 literacy classroom, because all the good things we know about good pedagogy and talking with preps and grade ones are exactly the same as when we're talking about teachers, and making no wrong answers, encouraging people share, being supportive, So that's the kind of environment that we're trying to do as we do this with the Canvas. And then what we're trying to do is get some shared understanding. So if people have disagreements, or and here it's a lot easier, obviously, because we're all coming from different points of view. Whereas in a school setting where we have teachers that teach next to each other, we might have some people that have got a bit stronger point of view about this is the only way and my way is the right way. But that's generally what we do. Once we've done this, we can then actually do some auditing if we wanted to, and I'm conscious of the time, so we won't do that. And I might schedule another one in a few weeks' time if people think, and we actually say, well, once we've described or visualised our model, what does it mean? But I'll briefly talk about that now. Unless people are desperately want to talk about something else or add something to the Canvas that we haven't added. What we'd do next is then do a bit of auditing and say, well, look at the things and goes, well, does the policies that we have in place, make this possible? Does the educator role that we've got, especially if it's something new, do these important things we've highlighted in each of the boxes, do they fit, and do they match up with the important things that we've got in the other boxes? Do our pedagogical beliefs really describe and fit in line with the roles and responsibilities of the learner and the educator and the activities of what we're doing, and do the main enablers and strategies really make what the learner is trying to do possible in the activities, or there are other enablers that we might need, and so we do that auditing, and we can use that, and I've showed this last week, but and we can do it on the paper version as well. On the web version, we do have a SWOT analysis that we can then use, and we can even use some color codes if we want to, and we can talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the learner role, and talk about what new opportunities there might be, which might be particularly useful if you were just thinking about introducing iPads, for example, seeing that's what we're talking about today, saying, well, what might be the new opportunities of introducing the iPads? What might be the threats? Okay, so we can do that. And that's how we would then look at the Canvas and audit that. And then over time we might then say, well, what happens if we tried these questions? So we've got a baseline to say, well, this is where we are. This is the agreement that we have about this learning and teaching model. Now let's ask some what-if questions. What if we tried this? What if we tried that? What if we did this? How would this change? And we can put that in. So what if we did this? What if we did that? And that's basically how the Canvas works. Has anybody got any ideas or responses or anything we didn't do? Oh, is the Canvas shared? It's not shared, but to share a Canvas, what you do is you go edit at the bottom here, and you make it public, and you press update, and then you click here, then you copy the URL, and it's now shared, Jenny. And I'll paste that in here. So it is shared now, and I'll post that in the notes as well. And I can share the other one as well. So we have shared it. By default, the Canvases are private. We're still rolling out. And just to give you I'm actually changing a lot of the next bit, the innovation parts over the next 2 weeks. And I haven't got groups working for the online version either, so they're probably about 3 weeks away. But that's doing. Has anybody got any comments now about that, what we've just done with the model, and describing any questions about how we might use it and what we might do, or any problems you might see, or any things that you think worked really well?
Can more than one person work on it at the same time?
Not at the moment. What we've done in the school is thrown it up on the whiteboard. So when we've had teachers in a group, I think it's best to do what we did today, is have people sitting around the room or in the hangout, and one person typing, and everybody else having a discussion. And I think that works. The nature of the conversation, and Luke, you chime in if you disagree and say, Richard, hurry up and get a shared writing feature. But the way that we do it generally does allow it to, the conversation doesn't go so fast that you can't keep up. Generally.
Sometimes I think the conversation is more important than the end product.
Oh, definitely. I've just turned off the sharing. Oh, definitely, Jenny. I really agree.
Yeah. So the piece of paper and what you end up with gets put somewhere or filed somewhere, or it's online somewhere. But actually, the conversation everyone had and the understandings they developed from going through that process is the important thing. And I guess that Canvas gives a basis for that to happen.
Yes, totally agree, and that's the idea of it, that we can, I guess, get some common language and some understanding, and then also when we see other people's practice and we talk to other people, we can help tell the differences and the similarities between our practice and other people's practice, which can be really useful when we're talking to people that are from different contexts, or even people in our own school from different levels, or we're going off to a conference, or we're listening to Daryl's podcast and somebody comes up something new. We can start thinking, well, how would it change my practice, or how would it change my classroom, or how would it change the things that my students do if I introduce this thing? I think it starts giving us a framework to imagine what might change. So, any other comments? Andrew, how did you feel that went in visualising what we were trying to visualise, seeing you proposed that model? And I've taken the camera off the screen. I can put it back up if you want.
No, that's right. I've got it on a tab now that you've shared it in the chat. Yeah, good. I mean, and I was literally putting myself in a situation if I had to sit around, or not just me, but the team, the two teams, I suppose, were sitting around having that conversation, because interestingly enough, it's going to change. It might not make any change, and that's the worry. But we're hoping that it will make some change, and I think they need something to have a conversation around like that. And look, I think they're great. There's stuff that you could really zero in on within that. So yeah, no, it's good. There was a couple of things, and I know we raised this the last session we had, is that it'd be interesting to see, reflecting back, what people would say about the culture within, not necessarily the team, but perhaps the school as well, how that, or how that, what their interpretation is on that. So, and I don't think they get a chance to really talk about these things, like what is their educator's role specifically, and compare that to the learner role even. In a conversation, generally it's about, let's get down and plan, here's a bunch of activities, here's the data, and here's the assessment, and here's how we're going to target this. I
totally agree.
Pedagogical beliefs, that'll be an interesting one too, to hear people articulate that too.
Yeah, and I think people do, and I think if we went more into the literacy, this class today, because if we're thinking about reading, what are the things that what are the pedagogical beliefs that underpin the way we do literacy, and some of them were touched on around scaffolding, and modelling, because I think sometimes unpacking those things, and teachers really do understand, because the literacy block, as you mentioned in it's not just the northern region that are, teach literacy like it's, from the Bible, and do a very good job. So this is something that they really understand well and could probably talk about pedagogy. If anybody's going to be able to talk about pedagogy, it's early years teachers around teaching literacy and numeracy. So whereas there might be other teaching groups that have a lot more trouble. But it's really interesting to start talking about that, especially when you start then saying, what if we tried flipped learning? And then you talk, well, what are the pedagogical beliefs around flipped learning? Or what if we tried this? Especially when we talk about radical moves. Or, say, for example, maths is really interesting. What if we went to games and simulation? What are the changes in pedagogical beliefs when we actually start talking about games and simulations being an enabler rather than, practice equations? Then would really see, hey, this is a bigger change than we think it is. And do those new pedagogical beliefs really align with what we believe about teaching and learning? I think when we start having those conversations, maths, I think that's quite a good example. Maths, standard maths as opposed to simulations and games-based maths, in the early years classroom. That's, pretty interesting conversations that I agree we very rarely have.
Well, and the other beautiful thing about it is that if it isn't a shared canvas where people can see, you get a sense of the conversation. You're not there present, but you can get a sense of what's been discussed and what a team's pedagogical beliefs are, or what they think the educator or learner's role is. So a 5-6 team might be actually really quite interested in seeing the interpretation from a early years team. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And their approach and intent.
Yeah, so I'd have no plans at the moment, Jenny, to have two people be able to work on the same, or multiple people be able to work on the same canvas at the time. But I do have the plans of groups being able to own canvases and then edit, not synchronously, asynchronously, edit these canvases. The other thing I'm doing, I can show you if I want. You may not want to see this. You may hate this. The other thing I'm doing as a sneak preview, can you see that?
Yeah.
So the idea is that there'll be a dashboard and the different things around what are the differences, how many different ideas are we generating, what are the activities, and then these and the color, you can see that this is not live and this is not the colors it's going to be. The changes in student behaviors, the change in teachers' behaviors, and the changes in technology use, And so I see this idea of a school really having I'm going to turn that off now, a school having a dashboard to actually say, this is what, can we see what the whole school's doing and what we believe about teaching and learning, but also can we see the progress that people are having as they seek to implement whatever they're trying to implement, and as we slowly, change our practice and take advantage of some new possibilities, thanks, whether it's technology or whether it's other initiatives. So I guess that's where I'm heading, and I hope that that's, useful and quite powerful to tell the story, I guess, and also to enable leadership to be, I guess, more in touch with what's happening in the classroom, and also maybe schools more in touch with what's happening across the school. You think about the divide between specialist programs and, the mainstream classes, and I used to be a specialist teacher, so I can talk about specialist programs, but, there often is a disconnect. Maybe not at all schools, but, and I think there might be ways that we can bridge that disconnect, in interesting ways. But anyway. Well, I'm conscious we've gone over the 9 o'clock. So has anybody else got any things we need to address before we wind up this session? Any questions that we didn't answer, or any questions that are jumping out? And obviously you can use the Google group to discuss things or anything. Or what do we need to do? Do we feel that I need to do some more of these types of sessions, or what? I've asked you a bunch of questions, and if you're all happy, we'll just stop. But if you've got any last things you want to discuss, please do so now.
All good.
All good.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the more examples you see, the better. Seeing lots of examples is good.
No worries. Sounds good. Well, the beta's available if people want to join, and you can make canvases. I'd encourage you to get in and have a go. If you try it with teachers, that's even better. And I showed you quickly at the end how to make them public. So if you ever want to make a canvas and make it public, that would be great too. But I'll keep sharing some more examples as I can. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me with this hangout tonight. I really appreciated the conversations and your willingness to share, and I'm going to press stop broadcast right now. Thank you.